back at the founding of our nation, Benjamin Franklin was walking out of Constitution Hall. And as he was walking out, someone who was described, I think, as a bystander said to him, "You know, Dr. Franklin, what did we get? A monarchy or a republic?" And he responded, "A republican if you can keep it." Today, like I think no other time in American history, we face a moment where the question is, can we keep our republic? The question is, can we take what the founders started and what for over 200 years has been a bastion of freedom, opportunity, and just a sense of what can be great in human beings' lives? Will we protect that bastion? Will we protect this republic? Can we keep it? And we're seeing a president who is clinging to his notion of what it means to be American, which seems to be crisis after crisis and opportunity after opportunity for him and the government to take over our lives. Can we keep this republic? I'm Ed Martin. I'm running for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District, and I'm here today to ask for your help over these next months and for your vote. And before I go much further, I need to introduce to you my wife, Carol, who is sitting in the front row, who is, like Ray and Ann, is a great part of this team and what we're about. And I just want to say thank you, Carol, for being here and let you all know that my wife, Carol's in the front row. Thanks, Carol. What is America? Why would we go about this? Ann's working so hard, I'm working hard, our families are doing this. Why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? What are we going to do to keep this republic? I think America comes down, for me, comes down to something I've thought about, comes down to sort of three things, three sort of concepts: opportunity, liberty, and confidence. Almost like no other place in human history, this republic started as a place where opportunity was available for all, and it's slipping away. We see a president that's piled on Obamacare and regulations and Dodd-Frank. He's piled on our children's unemployment rate amongst 18 to 24-year-olds that's almost double, more than double, than the unemployment rate for the rest of the nation. We've seen opportunity that was the center of America slipping away. When I'm in Congress, what I'm going to work to do is unleash opportunity. No more government deciding who wins and who loses, who gets to decide what's regulated, what's not. Get out of our way, unleash opportunity. But it's not going to happen by just voting in Washington, D.C. Voting is not enough. Ann and I can't go up there. It's not enough to vote anymore. We have to win the argument. We have to take back our republic. Liberty. America's greatness also lies, it's a place where opportunity is available to all, but liberty is special here. The Bill of Rights is spectacular. Read it. See it. The Second Amendment is not about shooting your gun for sport or for fun or for hunting. It's about stabilizing society. Other nations stare at us in wonder. Liberty here for religion, for assembly, for liberty for us to have our states and have our freedom. Liberty for our families, our churches. We have to have leaders who understand preserving liberty is at the center of protecting this republic. President Obama doesn't get it. The Congress doesn't get it. We've seen growth again. Obamacare is intruding on our lives in a way that is spectacular. If you care about pro-life, if you care about abortion, we have a government that is now saying it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, you will now participate in abortion, you will now be paying for abortion, you'll now be part of abortion. And that's not the end. They're setting up a system of health care that will tell you when you can live and when you can die. They'll tell you what grandma and grandpa can receive and what they can't. We've got to fight to preserve liberty because our republic's at stake. And confidence. America is this great place because we know that we can be and succeed based on opportunity and liberty. But that too is slipping away. Talk to young people that are graduating college and they're wondering what their future can be. Talk to families that are wondering how they're going to pay for college and what's going to happen down the line. We need to replace our president, and we need to get elected officials that won't just vote right. Voting's not enough. We've got to restore confidence. I'm Ed Martin. I'm here to earn your vote, and thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, and many, many thanks to our Speaker-elect Tim Jones and Committeeman Chris Howard, and so many others that have worked hard to put this together. It's great. Young conservatives at Marquette. Wow, that's a fantastic club and organization. And Ed, I want to thank you for being here, and Carol, you always put yourself in the arena, and I thank you for your service to others, to country, and to community. And thanks to all of you. Wow, I mean, to care so much, to show up here on a Saturday afternoon. You care about your country and your families. I thank you for being here, especially for a race that is over 10 months away. And today, this afternoon, I want to share a story with you. It's a true story, a real story, and I'd like you to picture this. It is the late spring of 1989. I was married and 27 years old. I had a great management position at Ralston Purina, and we were blessed with a beautiful 6-month-old son named Raymond, who is now 6'5" and a second lieutenant, working hard to be an Army Ranger down at Fort Benning. Can't believe he was 6 months. It's almost amazing to me. My husband, Ray, who's sitting here on the front row, we've been married for almost 25 years. But at the time, Ray was a young attorney at then Solthouse and Kaplan, and he had a promising future in the practice of law. We were living in our very first little home on Webster Groves, and we received a call. A call to put our faith and our conservative ideals and core values into action. A call from an administration and from a man of great integrity and character, a man on a mission to renew our conservative values in the great state of Missouri, a man who always and continues to call people to their highest and their best. So we packed up the U-Haul and we left it all behind, except for the baby, of course. And we followed our beliefs and the principles that were absolutely emblazoned in our hearts. And we headed to our state's capital to serve with one of my mentors, my personal and political hero, then Governor John Ashcroft. And today I am honored and I am mostly humbled to announce the wholehearted endorsement of John Ashcroft in my bid to become the next member of the United States Congress in the 2nd District. I'm grateful. I am so grateful that he is standing with me in my deeply rooted conservative values and principles and is willing to publicly acknowledge my unwavering commitment to the sanctity of life from conception to natural death, a belief in traditional marriage and fighting for our families, the defending of our individual rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment, absolutely stopping the overreach of the federal government against the American will, a dedication to community and a faith in God. And now I stand before you today, a woman ready to put these values into action again. A doer, a fighter, a first-time candidate, ready to represent my friends and my colleagues and family in my hometown, where I have always been rooted and always will be rooted. You can trust me to be your strong, effective, conservative voice in Washington, D.C. A proven winner, an effective leader, a committed conservative. I thank you so very much for being here today, and I ask you to enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
We'll begin, and we'll ask the same question of Anna if you're finished. After Obamacare is repealed or ruled unconstitutional, I like the premise on that, what is your vision as to what should replace it, or where should we go with health care and health care cost issues in this country?
Well, first, I welcome that optimism. I think one of the great fights of the next couple of years is going to be how we get back, we fight back Obamacare. And I know some of you have been in the crowd when we've talked about what's necessary to get Obamacare repealed. Pretty hard math. We got to try for it, but then we've got to have people in Congress that will fight the implementation of it, the funding, as well as the bureaucratic sort of regulations. But to imagine a world where we can go beyond Obamacare, it's great. I think the first thing is we've seen successful models of healthcare reform. They tend to be things like Medicare Advantage, which is actually practiced right here in the St. Louis area. My wife is a geriatrics physician and has been involved in that. Medicare Advantage has the advantage of getting people to have skin in the game. If we're going to have a healthcare program where people can be a part of this, they're going to get something, they've got to be vested in it. I was Matt Blunt's chief of staff, and we tried to redo Medicaid. And when we got everyone in the room, we had different kinds of plans, and what ended up happening was no one wanted to create a system where wellness was at the center and people had a skin in the game. An entitlement like that will never work. So we're going to look at Medicare Advantage, expanding it. Health savings accounts are very, very effective. They've been gutted by Obamacare. Health savings accounts that say, hey, your deductible may go up, but you're going to be able to put money in with pre-tax benefit and then use that money to decide what you're going to do with your health care, and you can keep it throughout time. You know, you can keep it till your retirement. If you get sick later in your life, you can keep it all the way through. Again, it gives you skin in the game. I think we need to have a serious conversation. I've never seen anything as hypocritical as a debate on health care in which there was not one hearing on lawsuit abuse. There's not a businessman or businesswoman or a doctor or nurse or medical professional who doesn't recognize that it is the bottom-feeding plaintiffs' attorneys who are destroying aspects of American business and American healthcare. So we ought to find out, and I think actually at the federal level, tort reform can be dangerous. I think we ought to foster it at the local level like Matt Blunt did and others. And then finally, we have to be willing to have a conversation that goes like this. We can't have entitlement programs that cover everybody. We have to be willing to say we're going to cut benefits for some people. We want a safety net. We don't want a hammock. And what's happened in America is our healthcare system has become a hammock. It's become a program where it's not about giving people a hand up when they're really stuck. It's about continuing a way of living that's not good for them. One last thing on Obamacare. I do think we have to understand that Obamacare right now is playing out with more power for certain groups in the healthcare system, whether it's the insurance companies or the hospital systems. And we have to be aware that when we have true reform, the main ingredient is competition amongst providers, amongst people, so you get more options. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me be very clear. The very first thing that I will do if I am honored to be sent to Congress by each of you is to repeal Obamacare. Absolutely repeal it. There's a $1 trillion lug right now that we can't afford, that stands between people and their doctors. There is nothing good about the government running our healthcare system in any way, shape, or form. And I want to thank leaders like Senator Jane Cunningham for doing what Missouri did first with Proposition C. We spoke. We were the first to speak about Obamacare. Almost 72% of Americans rejected it, or pardon me, of Missourians rejected it. And the next day, when the White House spoke and asked, what do you think about the referendum that Missourians just passed, and said 72% reject nationalized health care and Obamacare, and they said, it doesn't matter. Well, guess what? It does matter. It matters in a very large way, and there are so many things that we can do to add free market principles to our healthcare system. Whether they're association healthcare plans, whether they're medical savings accounts, whether it's portability across state lines, just like you can other insurance, like your vehicle insurance. There are so many things, including tort reform, that have to be revised and can be done first. But the key here is not to ever put the government between you and your healthcare provider. We have to bring down costs, and people have to take ownership of that. You know, when people pay a deductible and they get their insurance bill, or pardon me, their medical bill, they never see the fact that they may be paying $95 for an ibuprofen. or $72 for an Ace Bandage. We have to take some ownership ourselves in terms of the healthcare costs that are out there. But I promise you and give you my word that we will do away with this individual unconstitutional mandate in Obamacare if I'm elected to Congress. Thank you.
Could you, in 1 minute, could both of you further go into specific details as to what you would do with the tens of millions of illegal immigrants who are currently here? What policies should the federal government pursue? And we'll start with Ed and then Ann. 1 minute each.
Well, I think first of all, this is I don't know where the question comes. This is one of these questions that they try to get conservatives to become liberals on. Look, I don't think there's any. This is what we have to do: secure the border. Anyone who's here illegally cannot have a pathway to citizenship. How we get them to go home, or go back to their native country is a different question. I think that's going to be much harder to do, but one that we can't do. Now, I lived in Indonesia for a year right after college, and I lived for a couple years in Europe, like Ann did. And you see in those parts of the world people that come to nations that are not ever going to, they can't be citizens. You can be there and work and be a part of the community. In this case, people that came here illegally, they can't go to the front of the line ahead of other people. So I think when we get down to the question of how we'll do it, that the principles are this: if you come here illegally, you can never be a voting citizen. That's what the left wants to do. They want a voting bloc. The second thing you can't do is you can't get benefits while you're here. We can't fall for what Rick Perry and others fell for. And the final thing is, when we go to decide how you have to leave, we're Americans. We'll figure it out. And we're not going to do it in a way that I think is un-American, but we have to be willing to admit that we're not going to change that policy along the line. It's a trick to try to make us settle for something that we shouldn't.
To citizenship. It's called legal immigration. It's very simple. As a citizenry that follows the rule of law, if you are here illegally, you must leave. And we will make sure that we do that when someone actually enforces these laws by securing the border first, saying no amnesty, and making sure that illegal aliens leave and do not have access, as I said, to the same rights and privileges that we have as American citizens. We have to hold our employers accountable. I think that many would leave if we held those that are employing the illegal immigrants accountable.
A number of questions on this topic as well. Another hot button topic that definitely is tied directly to our status as a nation with jobs and the economy, and that is the subject of labor and unions. And again, we got a number of very similar questions on this topic. So we'll start with Ann on this one. And I would say in general, the questions revolved around questioning your positions on, for both of you, it's 3 minutes for both of you. What are your positions on labor unions? Do you support right to work? Do you have different positions on if we're talking about public sector or private sector labor unions? And you could address any of the other topics under that umbrella as well.
Thank you.
Labor unions, labor reform.
Thank you for the question. And yes, Missourians have a right to vote once again, I think, on a right to work law. And yes, I would support a right to work law if I were in Congress. We have 22 states that are right to work states currently in the United States of America, and we are surrounded here in Missouri by right-to-work states, other than Illinois, which has a whole host of problems. We can talk about Greece if we want to talk about Illinois. And I think Kentucky may be the only other one, but we're surrounded by right-to-work states. And it's a big, big issue when it comes to what I call changing the economic environment. And I talked a little bit about that in terms of tax reform and regulation reform, but it also has to do with right to work. And I think that what we find in most right-to-work states is that unemployment is lower, that wages are higher, and that people are really voting to support right to work in many ways by their feet. They're moving to right-to-work states. And it is a disgrace what our federal government has done through the National Labor Relations Board to people like Boeing in South Carolina, an absolute mockery and to any kind of company and free market system, the fact that they would go and try and penalize and sue the Boeing company because they moved to a right-to-work state is wrong. So yes, I support that. In terms of public and private employees, privately people have a right to collective bargaining and to gather and to have a discussion with their employers. But public sector employees are employed by the taxpayers, and there is a definite conflict of interest there. So I do not support collective bargaining for public employees, and I was very pleased to have this week here in St. Louis supporting me, Governor Chris Christie, who came and did a wonderful event for me. Many of you in the room were there on, I think it was Tuesday morning. These weeks are just flying by, and there is no one who's a bigger hero to me in terms of taking on teachers' unions and others when it comes to issues of collective bargaining. We have so many governors, whether it's Governor Wagner, we see what's happening in Indiana. Many of them are standing up at last. So, thank you.
This question is at the center of whether we're going to get real and going to try to reform government, okay? And first of all, on right to work, of course I support right to work. Different than what Ann said is Senator Rand Paul has a national right to work bill that would be helpful at making sure that states can invoke right to work, and that what the NLRB and others are trying to do with federal regulation wouldn't stomp on what is already right to work states. So I support that bill. More importantly, I support right to work. I think if they can get it on the ballot in Missouri, that'd be great. It's very difficult to pass right to work on the ballot in Missouri, in any state. That's why Scott Walker and Speaker Fitzgerald and President Pro Tem Fitzgerald up in Wisconsin did that by legislation. So not only will I publicly say, do right to work on the ballot, I'll publicly say to Tim Jones and Speaker Tilley and Rob Mayer, do it in the legislature. And force Jay Nixon to either admit that he won't, well, first get him out from under his desk, see if he's got those Sweetenlow packets that are supposed to make him overly, and get those, the Chinese Sweetenlow. But after you do that, force him to have to answer the question. And if he won't answer the question, then replace Jay Nixon. If he won't sign right to work, replace Jay Nixon. But the question is more fundamental. I told you earlier, it's boom times in Washington, D.C., okay? Why? Because the unions are stronger. There's sets of federal work rules that make it impossible to fire people except based on seniority. So it's not on merit. This is insane. This is not American. It has to stop. I work for Matt Blunt. I mentioned we took on CWA and SEIU. You guys may have heard of SEIU. They have a sub-corporation called Acorn. They just focus on voter fraud, not on actual unionizing. But we have to say this sentence. We need to abolish public sector unions, not cut their collective bargaining. We need to end them in Missouri. Their effectiveness has gone beyond what we thought it would be. And here's another fact. We have to be honest with each other. Chris Christie kills me. These endorsements are killing me. I grew up in New Jersey. I mean, the guy's out there. Chris Christie didn't say, I'm against public sector unions. You know what he said? He walked in the room and he said, look, if you're a firefighter, I want you to have a pension. But we can't fill your pension coffers if we keep this going. So we're going to reform your pension, make you pay more like normal people do, make you put some skin in the game. The fact is this, on the public sector unions and on the power of the unions in general, it's not enough to vote. Voting is not enough. Leaders lead. And the fact is, our country is going down towards Greece because we're not getting control of the public sector unions at every level. And if we don't want to say that, then we'll just be Greece. So I want to say it, and we're going to go after them, and we have to have major reform. It's coming. I know there's 87 people, 87 new guys and gals up in D.C. in Congress. I'd like to be 88 or 89 or 90 because we've got to get more and more and more. Thanks.
The people know our debt crisis cannot be fixed without changes to entitlement programs like Social Security. Are you willing to be truthful and realistic when it comes to cutting entitlements and reforming entitlements? If so, how do you specifically propose to fix the problems of entitlements?
I'm having fun now, Tim. Look, this is a choice that they try to make. President Obama has spent more money in his 2 years than anybody ever could have imagined. Even the Pelosi and Reid, I think, sit around there like, this is unreal. We got this guy to spend all this money. And now he turns around and he says, it's so bad, we're going to have to cut back. We're going to have to cut Social Security. Grandma's going to be eating dog food. Well, this is insane. This is not fair. It's un-American. It can't be done. So here's where we start. Let's start being honest. If you paid into Social Security, you should get your money out. That's America. If you pay into Medicare, you should get your money out. That's America. You get your benefit. Now let's go from there. Too many people are on Social Security and Medicare for disabilities that have been an expansion of the welfare state, that have been an entitlement program that we won't want to say. Again, my wife is here. You know, she'll have patients, she'll come home and say, someone saw me, 42 years old, 380 pounds, qualifying because of disability that's obesity. Now there are some people that may have a problem that makes them obese, but we're the only country in the world that has poor people that are obese. I wish it was a joke. It's not a joke. So the question is, how do you want to cut back? I think we need to say to everyone who's not on Social Security and welfare, Medicare, we're going to have a different system when you get there. We're going to have to do some things differently, whether it is some sort of sharing in health savings account, whether it's some sort of block grants to states to try to make costs better. Skin in the game is the only way it's going to work. But then we have to do this. We have to be willing to say what's on the chopping block is everything. Food stamps, the Medicaid, everything's on the block. We can't do everything for everybody. The growth in the size of the government has to stop. So again, I think there's lots of good conservative principles that have to do with giving you more control over your money, giving you more control over your future. I think we should look at them, but we should not allow the left and our side to fall for this debate that, oh, now we have to cut, so grandma's first. And by the way, this is another reason I mentioned earlier that young people are wondering about what America's about, because they look at us and they think, we don't think there's going to be anything left for us. We know Social Security is broke. Medicare is broke. So don't tell us, don't pretend that we're going to have something we don't. And to restore confidence for those folks, we have to have a system that says, you have skin in the game. You can have a part of this. There will be something for you, not an IOU in the Social Security Trust Fund. One last comment. The fact is this, that President Obama, again, is obscuring. We've watched, you know, Rush Limbaugh will call him the food stamp president. And that is true. There's been a great increase of food stamps. But there's other policies. Unemployment insurance is now 99 weeks. And the studies show that people get off of unemployment within 5 or 6 or 10 weeks of the end of it. You know, we can't take from all that are working in America and give it to all that aren't working, or we end up in a place where it's not that republic we mentioned. And again, voting's not enough. We've got to stand up and lead on these issues. Thanks.
Our entitlement system is not just broken. It's about to be bankrupt. Frankly, it is bankrupt. And it is 43% of our budget. And how we have to frame this issue is not in cutting it, it's in saving it for the future. This is about saving it for the future. This is not about demagoguing the issue. It's not about scaring our seniors. It's not about the administration putting Granny in a wheelchair and pushing her over the cliff. You all saw the ad. That's reprehensible, absolutely reprehensible. We have to keep our promises to the seniors. We have to keep our promises to the seniors. I like the Ryan Plan. I was one of the very first out of the box to support the Ryan Plan. At least it's a starting point. We're having an adult conversation about this issue. Finally, it's been the third rail of politics for so very many years, but it is 43% of our budget, and it is absolutely bankrupt. We have to save it for the future, and that means we're going to have to take some real reforms in place. And for young people, that means moving this from an entitlement society to an ownership society, giving you some skin in the game, letting there be some medical savings accounts, letting there be optional retirement accounts so that these young people from Marquette can actually have some control over their own destiny. That is how we're going to solve this problem, but we've got to dig in, and right now what we have is a Democrat Party and administration that wants to fearmonger, wants to play class warfare, wants to scare our seniors, and does not want to have an adult conversation when it comes to entitlement reform.
do you or do you not believe that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme? And if it's not, then how would you describe it? Back to Ann.
I'm happy to go first. I don't know what we're going to call it. I'm going to call it bankrupt, and I'm going to call it broken, and I'm going to call it absolutely something that must be reformed, not, as I said, because we're trying to do away with it. Let's be real clear. You know what? It's the Democrat Party through Obamacare, the only ones that get $500 billion from Medicare. All right, let's be very clear about who's doing the cutting here and who's talking about an adult conversation about reform. We need, as I said, to give young people some ownership, some skin in the game in this. And I think that is the only way that they're going to see this for the future. I think I'm out of time.
It's worse than the Ponzi scheme. By the way, if you want to see the first pitch, you got to leave now. So I don't want to. Ann and I will forgive you. We agreed before I would put you on a certain watch list if you leave now, but we understand. Hey, listen, it's worse than a Ponzi scheme. I mean, this is a misunderstanding. I don't want to take on Rick Perry here today. I mean, he hasn't endorsed you yet, has he? Listen. A Ponzi scheme is when you get money in and you keep it, right? And then you get money from lots of people and you pay it out using the money there. So you're playing it going like this. It's worse than a Ponzi scheme. The government takes the money in and spends it on other stuff, and then they borrow money, print money to give you back your money. It's not, a Ponzi scheme would be cleaner. You'd be able to see where the money is and what happened. And instead we have congressmen and women of both parties who are up there who again, they say they're going to vote right, maybe they do, but they're not willing to do what's more than that. And I think, so it's worse than a Ponzi scheme. I'm not sure that's a headline, but we'll try.
Minutes for each of you. Whether it's the EPA, the Department of Labor, or the Department of Education, it seems as if all of the federal agencies are helping out our current president do legislation by over-regulation. So, if you were in Congress, or when you get to Congress, what would you do to stop this legislation by regulation?
Gosh, Tim, there's so much to talk about, and I could stay for an hour on this topic alone. You forgot OSHA, by the way, OSHA. Someone once said, a comic said, take 3 or 4 letters and put them together in any order, and it'll be a federal agency of some kind. There's a printing company out here in West St. Louis County, and the printer took me on a tour of the plant, and when we got done, I said, how's EPA treating it? He said, they're always bad. And I said, how's OSHA treating it? He said, well, that's funny you should ask. 6 months ago, they came to an inspection. They found no safety violations for our workers. But they fined me $2,000 because the water cooler was not plugged directly into the wall. It was plugged into an uncertified, unsanctified, unsomething plug, an extension cord. So he fought it for 6 months. He won ultimately, and he paid a $100 fine. That's a snapshot of what's going on. So there's 2 things we can do. You won't be surprised. We can go up there and vote right, and then we can do some more. And here's what I think we have to do. We have to vote right, and then we have to take on, department by department, what's happening. And the best 2 ways to do that within that taking on the department, the first is to demand transparency. Darrell Issa, the congressman from California, is up there whooping on these guys. He's not doing anything other than show me what you did with the money, show me the trail of influence, show me why Solyndra got all this money and all this loan. Show me what you did. If you shine a light on these guys and gals, you're going to find, first you're going to see a lot of cockroaches scurry around, but then you're going to find a lot of problems. And that transparency, in Missouri, Matt Blunt did it. He had a great chief of staff at that point. And we put in place a transparency portal that showed every single tax dollar when it left Missouri's government, where it went to, who it went to, on what date, for what. And when you get the transparency, then you get people like Lisa and others that dig in and say, hey, what's going on? Governor Blunt went to D.C. at one point. He got in, someone said, I love what you're doing, but it looks like you spent $15,000 at Annie's bra shop. And he said, why is that? And Governor Blunt said, I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out. And it had to do with corrections, because the corrections needed it for some of the women that are serving in women's penitentiaries. So, look, transparency is the first tool. Okay? And you got to go in and say to the Secretary of Education, you got $8 billion in the stimulus, a slush fund. Where's the money? What's it doing to influence life? What's it doing to change our schools? We got to follow the money and push really hard. But the second thing is much more difficult. We've got to have congressmen and women who decide to stand up in their home district and do more than just vote. So when OSHA comes, you call us. And we get down in the trenches and we say, not anymore. We'll keep the water clean. We'll keep the kids safe. We don't want child labor. But we're not going to let this happen. Not in the 2nd Congressional District. Go to Lacey Clay's district. Not here. But I'm serious. We've got to do that. We've got to fight for our survival, and that's a starting point. Thank you.
You just teed this up one too many times. Matt Blunt also had a great state party chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, and made him governor of this great state of Missouri, along with a whole team of people that helped. And he's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And yes, his father endorsed me. I'm sorry. Now, regulation. Oh my goodness. So if this government can't legislate it, as we've seen through things like Obamacare, they backdoor it through EPA and HUD and Labor and Interior and Energy, and we can go on and on and on. I checked the Federal Register. There are 4,200 rules and regulations in the pipeline to move through this government. It is obscene, and it is crushing our job creators every single day. This government is spitting them out by the thousands. We're doing these great grassroots things all over the district called tabletops, and we're hitting every corner that we can. We go into people's homes and we sit down with friends and neighbors and people they go to church with, and they've just been fantastic things to do. And I was in St. Charles the other night. A guy named Jeff, worked at HUD for 22 years, talked about on Monday, just this past Monday, they have 70 employees, which he says is double what they need at the moment, period. But 7 new employees showed up at HUD on Monday. 7 new employees, because the budget at midnight last night was closed down, right? That was it, the end of the fiscal year. And they had full-time employees, FTEs, that had been allocated, and if those people hadn't shown up, guess where that money would have gone? Guess where that money should have gone? Back into the government, it's our money. It's our money, and they're spending it hand over fist. And whether they're doing it at agencies like this, look what happened this past week too. We saw all this green job money that was thrown out. Now we've seen what happened at Solyndra, and Ed has talked about that. But it's happening everywhere. It happened all week long. We saw the billions that went out. We saw the billions that went out to, it was Nancy Pelosi's nephew or brother or somebody. We had a little case of that a year or so here in Missouri too. We had to do with windmills and the Carnahan family. And you know what? President Obama's coming here Tuesday to reward them. Again, this government must stop. We must stop the over-regulation, and how I'll do it are through things like the REINS Act that are sponsored in Congress. There are ways to do away with the executive orders that are being passed over and over and over again. There are congressional things that we can do to take back control of these agencies and stop this over-regulation that is killing our job creators.
A minute for both of you, and we'll start with you. What, if any, of the federal departments, do you feel that any of the federal departments are unnecessary, and which ones? Which ones would you actually look to completely get rid of?
Do we have time to list them all? Look, if you look in the Constitution, it's pretty clear, the enumerated powers. I mean, we've gone from the enumerated powers way beyond that. So, I think there's 2 things you have to say. As most of us would probably agree in this room, that departments like education and energy have gotten, out of control. And their founding is at least dubious, if not worse. The Energy Department was founded in 1978 or so, I think, and its goal was to end America's dependence on foreign oil. This has worked out really well. But don't worry, this was Jimmy Carter's. It may kick in sooner or later. I mean, he got a Nobel Prize. So it went from 0 employees to something like $24 billion and 117,000 employees. Used to be that $24 billion was a lot of money, before President Obama and before this era. But look, so that's an example where there are certain core things that are done in these departments that may actually be constitutional and may be worth considering. But we should have a conversation not about, Department of Homeland Security, as much as we all reacted to 9/11, and we should be thankful that our federal government and John Ashcroft, although it hurts me to know, has kept us safe. The Homeland Security Department and other departments have grown so much. We have turf battles where the Army has an intelligence division, and Homeland Security and FBI and CIA. We have to start looking broadly at this and decide where to cut. But I do think, by the way, last thing is, we've got to win the argument. Because our citizens, our fellow citizens, don't understand when we say abolish a department. They want you to explain why, and that's what we talked about earlier with transparency and the ability to sort of make the argument about what they're supposed to do. Sorry.
So,
Get a minute.
she gets a minute and a
That's
half.
all right, I don't need
She
that.
gets a minute and a half.
Thank you very much, and
Her mic's not on.
Mike,
is my mic not on?
Mike's not on.
Nothing,
What
nothing
did I
there.
do?
Dead.
Maybe Matthew did that.
Is it on? I can probably make myself be
Here.
heard.
Yeah.
All right, we'll pass it.
Yes.
This one has a little buzz, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, we have all sorts of agencies that need to be cut and reined in, modernized. There's redundancy in so many of them. We have got to return our power to the states. And yes, I would vote to close the Department of Education and the Department of Energy. Absolutely. But it's not enough. We have to start with sitting down with every one of these agencies, and when we have a Republican president, and when we have a Republican Senate, and more help in the Congress, we're going to be able to go to these agencies, and we're going to be able to do a top-to-bottom review and find out not just what needs to be modernized and what just is redundant, but what needs to be cut. It's not going to be enough to just look at the waste and the fraud and the abuse. It's going to have to be deep cuts in order to balance this budget. $14.5 trillion. We have a debt ceiling, and all that whole debate was so wrong. And here it is, at $17 trillion. It is wrong. We are mortgaging our children's future. I want to go to Washington, D.C. to cut up the government's credit card once and for all, and to stop the spending spree. And stop now. Here you go.
Washington, D.C. politics are broken. Each party is encamped in their positions completely. So nothing is being done at all. At some point, compromise must occur, the inertia will continue. However, you must have core principles. So, this is a two-part question, we'll start with Ann. Can the candidates identify one position that they believe in so strongly that it cannot be compromised, and then two, on the other hand, a position of the Democratic Party they believe can and could be used to find middle ground to solve a major policy issue, and what that issue and what that potential middle ground could be?
Oh, here we go. Well, yeah, number one, I want to go to repeal Obamacare once and for all, and that I will fight to do if and when sent to Congress. As I stated, I want to go to cut up the government's credit card, stop the spending spree, restore our core traditional values that are so important to who we are as Americans. I want to cut taxes. I want to root out the regulation. I think that, the federal government ought to be living under a balanced budget, like every household does, like every successful business does, like only these successful states do. I was a big proponent of cut, cap, and balance, and was one of the very first to sign that particular agreement. I don't agree with this debt ceiling deal or scheme that's been passed. I think it's wrong when some body of 12 people are sitting down and left with choices that I think at the end of the day may raise our taxes, may cut our defense department. And I was speaking to a group, congressman the other day, and said, I thought we sent a super committee as taxpayers to Washington, D.C., and I thought it was called Congress. And it's time for good, strong people to stand in the gap between we the people and Washington, D.C., and to dig in and be strong and principled and also persuade others. You know, I've had great success as over the years that I've been involved both in the private and public sector and in politics. I am an effective leader. I have brought people together. I have changed people's hearts and minds. I'm a good communicator and a proven winner, a committed conservative who can absolutely, I believe, and I hope, make a difference in Washington, D.C.
The question was one principle that you would never yield on, is that right, and one that the Democrats have. Yeah, John 5, verse 5, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. None of this is worth it if we have a culture that won't stand up for life. If you think it's okay to sign a truce on life, if you think it's okay to have Stupak cave and give up on the Stupak Amendment, let tax dollars go to abortion, if you think it's okay that we can have a world where abortion is legal, I've got a principle that won't jive with yours. And I fear for our republic, because I fear that too often now we worry about other important issues and we yield on that principle. Our side too. Way too much. With the Democrats, I can think of two. You have to go back a ways to get the first one. I like that President Kennedy was so eloquent on tax cuts and on how cutting taxes as a matter of economics can actually work. I think that he was very persuasive. It's also helpful for us whenever we want to advocate for tax cuts. We can say Kennedy said so too. It's getting a little bit far back to be too comfortable, using Kennedy. So I think one of the other things is on national security and on the question of Israel. There are some Democrats, not the president, not some of his party, but some Democrats that have shown a willingness to understand that living up to the Constitution means defending America and America's allies in a very real way, without fear of what uncomfortableness people may have about what we're going to have to do. I think national defense, there are some Democrats, their principles align with ours, and those would be the two. Thanks.
I would like for each of you, in 3 minutes, to describe your specific positions on the Second Amendment.
Well, thank you. That allows me to announce that there's a fine gentleman named Rich Heller. If you're a Second Amendment aficionado, Heller versus District of Columbia is a great case in which Justice Scalia and the majority clarified that the Second Amendment is not a militia right. It is an individual right that attaches to each person. So Rich Heller is a security guard in the Washington, D.C. area, and he's going to fly out here on Friday and spend Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It won't be a surprise that Brian Nieves wants to spend time with him, if you know Brian. But we're going to be around because the Second Amendment, look, my brother's the shooter. Kurtman's here. Kurtman's a Marine. My brother's a Marine. There's some people that are trained to be riflemen and be the shooters, and I'm an adequate hunter, not very good. It gets, cold out there. But I think the Second Amendment, more importantly, is very specific. Very specific. It's an individual right meant to stabilize our nation. It's not about, I said earlier, it's not about hunting, fishing, sports shooting. That's all good. That's all wonderful. But if you look at other nations around the world, where the only people that can own a weapon are the military, that's not a place where people have that kind of freedom and protection. It's a stabilizing influence. Look, if you read closely, the Obama administration, I mentioned Darrell Issa is going after the Obama administration. There is a program run by this administration called Fast and Furious, where I'm not joking, they bought guns and gave them to Mexican warlords to kill people so they could make an argument that we need more gun control. Yes. Okay? Look, we've got to protect the Second Amendment. And again, voting is not enough. We have had over the last 25 years too much where people are saying, well, it's a little bit of regulations, a little bit of that. Guns don't kill people. People use guns. People use cars. People use other things to kill people, and we should hold them accountable when they hurt others, no doubt. But we should understand that Second Amendment, what it means to the fabric of our country. It's tucked in that Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is such an incredible force for good. So that's my basic position. Thanks.
And I absolutely support, as I stated in my opening, the Second Amendment and our individual, again, and this was a new concept and a new legality here, that our individual rights to bear arms. You know, it's about protecting ourselves, our families, our property. Those are wonderful American rights that we have through the Second Amendment. And the Fast and Furious, escapade, awful, horrible thing that has happened. And I spent some time with Darrell Issa, and I will tell you that the hearings that he is working on right now are going to get to the bottom of this. There is no one that will stop like Darrell Issa, and you have seen him working this. And it's another example of how the federal government getting involved in something is wrong. They were trying to track these guns to the end users, and they didn't do it. They didn't track them. All they did was try and bring down some of the gun owners and others, and then ended up with one of our federal ATF agents dead. And it's another example of government failure when it comes to trying to put themselves into a situation. You know, one of the greatest things that happened with the Republican legislature here in Missouri was our conceal and carry rights. Yes. Aren't you glad that we have them? Sharon in my campaign, Catherine Hanaway, is here. She was Speaker of the House and was very involved in much of that also, and it's important. We have to protect our individual rights. You know, when I ran for the RNC chairmanship, I did a debate, and I ended up on, what was it, Jon Stewart's Daily Show or something. And they went around and asked everybody, how many guns do you own? And it was 0 and 0 and 5 and 3. And they got to me and I said, well, I know this answer because it was right after Christmas. And I said, we got a new gun safe, and it's 16. And they're about fell on their chairs. I have a husband who's a St. Louis County Police Commissioner, among other things. I have a son who headed up the combat weapons team at West Point. So we're very Second Amendment friendly. Thank you.
Well, you know, the Gettysburg Address is often quoted, and I'm not a great quoter, I'm kind of a paraphraser, but one of the things that Lincoln said in that was, I'll paraphrase it, was, the world will little remember and maybe not note well what we've said here, but they will remember what they did. The irony, of course, is everyone remembers what Lincoln said. But his point was, we'll say a lot here, and the question is what we're going to do. Now, what we do is not living up to the sacrifice that the men and women have made, giving their lives for our country, and we should pause any time we can. And you know, again, I always single out Kurtman because you know, he's such a prominent public leader now, who's a Marine and who's but there's so many veterans. And to all you veterans, raise your hand if you're a veteran so people can see and say thank you. Thank you. This election is really important, and for lots of reasons that we've talked about. And I think most, Ann and I might agree on this for sure. It's time to make sure that President Obama is a one-term president, for sure. I think this election is a big one because of what it means for this region. And I want to mention Renee Reuters here from the county council in Jefferson County, and nobody earlier was overlooked, I think. But from Jefferson County all the way through South County, West County, up to St. Charles, this district now, the second, is pretty spectacular. It's really all of St. Louis except what Lacey's messing up in the middle, and his team, you know, the team there. But it's important to recognize that this election is not just about what's happening in Washington. When Carol and I bought our home about 8 years ago, we had a baby 6 months old. Now we've got 3 with 1 on the way. And we knew that St. Louis's greatness was in the jobs and what was happening. We knew a TWA and an Anheuser-Busch and a future that looked like it was full of all sorts of opportunities. And we've seen a general slide where we feel like we're losing our future, whereas Carol would say, you better do something so our kids get jobs nearby. We should worry about that. And as Republicans, we should raise our hand and admit, how many times have you heard the party say they're going to open up a permanent headquarters here? Last year I heard them say it. For a decade they've said it. We're sitting here in this region and we're saying to ourselves, for too long we've been left behind, while other parts of the state and other parts of the country have had opportunities. Chrysler closed the last couple of years. I mean, it's devastating. So what the future is for this region, not just this nation, is again, not just voting, but being willing to say, what can we do to make it right? What can we do to stop bad-mouthing, poor-mouthing Missouri, this side of the state, this region, and instead say, what can we do to make things work? What can we do to say to businesses, we'll have your back? Charlie Dooley makes it very unfriendly if you're in St. Louis County. And his policies, his boards and commissions, all that he does is meant to stifle what's going on in favor of the unions. I got down involved in the PLA. He recently tried to do a PLA. And I got involved and a couple people called and said, you're running for Congress, cut it out. I said, look, if we don't have jobs, it's not going to matter who's in Congress. We can't just vote right, we've got to do more. And we blocked Dooley from doing a PLA. Our future depends on us coming together and doing more than voting, and doing more than going to Washington and fighting for the future. Ben Franklin, the end of the Constitutional Convention, he is quoted, I think, by one of his fellow founders, saying that he stared at the chair in which George Washington sat for the whole time. And he said many times in the back of the chair was a sun that was on the horizon with the spokes of the sun, you know, a beautiful sun kind of image carved in the wood. And he said, I stared at it all this time. I wondered if it was rising or setting. And he said, now I know it's rising. And the question for us in this election and in who we have representing us is not who will vote in Washington. It's not even who's, going to be good enough at telling you what we're doing. It's who's going to get shoulder to shoulder with us? Who's going to give us a chance? Because I'm a term limits guy. I think I can do 3 or 4 terms. My wife will tell me. By the way, I want to announce my wife is going to endorse me after this. But the future for us is standing shoulder to shoulder and knowing that voting's not enough, that we can make this country great. And thanks to Ann and Ray and for these guys here in the middle. Thank you.
I think that is a huge endorsement because it's a double. Congratulations to you, Carol and Ed. This is your 4th child on the way. Congratulations to you and many blessings. Our children and our grandchildren are why we're here right now. And I want to thank everybody for being here and for sticking around. I don't know what the count is here, but we'll all head straight to the bar to find out here in just a second. I want you all to know that I am a deeply committed conservative, an effective leader, and a proven winner who is grateful to have been born and raised in this district, a district that has given me every opportunity in life, in both the private and the public sector. I want to fight. I'm a fighter. I'm a doer. As I said at the onset, I'm a fighter. I want to fight for our families. I want to fight for our traditional values. I want to fight for our job creators, and I want to fight for our American way of life. To me, one of the saddest polls and statistics that's out there right now is that for the first time in the history of our nation, a majority of Americans believe that our children and grandchildren will not have a better way of life, will not have the same opportunities, will not have that same shot at the American dream, and that is unacceptable. That is disgraceful as far as I'm concerned. I have 3 wonderful children. I My oldest son, as I said, just graduated Raymond. He's down getting ready for Ranger School. He's out boar hunting today, I think is what he said. My middle son, who was supposed to be here today, is a resident assistant and working hard and a junior at Washington University. He's a marvelous kid and my brainiac of the family. My daughter, Mary Ruthie, is 16. Well, since she's not here, I'll tell you she's the daughter my mother says I deserve. So. No, she's great. In fact, she was in cross country today at the Priory Invitational and got a medal, and she's absolutely fantastic, and they're terrific. But it's about our children, and this government is mortgaging their future. The federal government is too big, and yet it gets bigger. Taxes are too high, and yet we have a president who wants to make them even higher. We spend too much, yet every single year we seem to be spending more. We borrow too much, yet every time we turn around, the feds are borrowing more. Our nation is hurting, it is bankrupt, and people are scared. You know, I worked hard in the 2010 election cycle on races from the county council, like Renee Reuters, in Jefferson County, all the way to Clay County. I was the proud chairman of Roy Blunt's U.S. Senate campaign, and you know what? We did so well by winning by 14 points. Robin Carnahan kind of cashed it in yesterday, is what I heard. And I will tell you the difference. The difference is in 2010 versus 2012. In 2010, people were angry. They were so fed up with the federal government overreach and intrusion in their life. Obamacare, cap and trade. This time around, they're scared. And you know what? We are not going to take it anymore. I want to fight alongside each and every single one of you. I want to stand in that gap. I want to stand between we the people and Washington, D.C. I want to be more than your conservative vote. I want to be your strong, effective, conservative voice in Congress. I believe in the greatness of America. I believe in the goodness of the American people. American exceptionalism doesn't come from the ground we stand on. It comes from the values that we share. And those values are like protecting innocent life, enjoying the full measure of our liberty, defending our Constitution, the ability to pursue our dreams unencumbered by an intrusive federal government, unleashing the entrepreneur spirit, belief in respect of our families, and one nation under God. These are the values that I call the American soul, and I want to go to Washington, D.C. to protect and to preserve the American soul. So I humbly ask for your support. I ask for your vote. I ask for your prayers for me, for Ray, for Ed, and for Carol, and for our great nation. Thank you all for caring so much.